Thank you. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Jasoda Nandana Brajajana Rajana Jasoda Nandana Brajajana Rajana Jamuna Tiravana Chari Jamuna Tiravana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you everyone for coming. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritam Naram Cheva Narottamam Deva Saraswatam Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudiraye Nashtapareshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Thank you everyone for coming. We'll be reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th Canto, Chapter 48, verse 23. Swayodito ayam jagato hitaya Yada yada veda patha puranaha Bhadyeta pashanda patir asad bis Tada bhavan sattva gunam bibarti Swayodito ayam jagato hitaya Yada yada veda patha puranaha Badyeta Pashanda Patir Asad Bis Tada Bhavan Sattva Guna Bibarti Swayodito Ayam Jagato Hitaya Yada Yada Veda Pata Puranaha Badyeta Pashanda Patir Asad Bis Tada Bhavan Sattva Guna Bibarti. Hare Krishna. So, okay, word for word. Swaya by you, Uditaha, enunciated. I am this, Jagataha, of the universe. Hitaya, for the benefit. Yada Yada, whenever. Veda, of the Vedic scriptures. Pathaha, the path of religiousness. Puranaha, ancient. Badyeta is obstructed. Pashanda, of atheism. Pataihi, by those who follow the path. Asad bihi, wicked persons. Tada, at that time. Bhavan, you. Sattvagunam, the pure mode of goodness. Bibarti, assume. Translation and no purport by the disciples of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. You, the Supreme Lord, originally enunciated the ancient religious path of the Vedas for the benefit of the whole universe. Whenever that path becomes obstructed by wicked persons following the path of atheism, you assume one of your incarnations, which are all in the transcendental mode of goodness. Amagyantamanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Shakshumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitanye Nabhutale Swayam Kadama Dadati Swapadantikam Panchakapaturu Vyasha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaurabhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for those who are here, especially our seniors and those online. And I can't forget, of course, my mother and my brother, His Grace, Jai Jagannath Prabhu. And today, of course, as usual, I'll start off with the quote that sets the theme of what we'll be discussing today. So this quote is by Colleen Hoover, and she writes, quote, "Never forget those who paved the way before you. Never stop trying to better the world for those who will inhabit it after you," end quote. So I'll say that one more time. Quote, "Never forget those who paved the way before you. Never stop trying to better the world for those who will inhabit it after you," end quote. So in this regard, I should be pointing out that today's verse describes two paths: the path of knowledge, or theism, and the path of ignorance, or atheism. So what is theism? It's described that theism is to declare the existence of God, the supreme controller, whereas atheism means to denounce the existence of God, the supreme controller. So according to all universal spiritual teachings, to the degree we denounce the existence of God, the supreme controller, then to that degree, we think we're God, the supreme controller. For example, obviously one of the biggest atheists in our scriptures is, can anyone guess? Bingo. Hiranyakashipu. So he's specifically described in many places as an atheist, the supreme, or where he thinks he's the supreme controller. So Hiranyakashipu thought he was the supreme controller. Why? Because he thought he had control over who lives and who dies. But when he couldn't kill his saintly son, Prahlad Maharaj, he realized, I am not the supreme controller. In much the same way, although like Hiranyakashipu, although we don't try to kill others, we do, as conditioned souls, have the tendency to try to kill others' reputation. But we learn from this pastime that just as Hiranyakashipu had no control over who lives and who dies, so also we have no control over whose reputation lives and whose reputation dies. So therefore, the very first verse of the Brahma Samhita doesn't say, Ishvara Padama Hiranyakashipu. The supreme controller is Hiranyakashipu. No, what does it say? Ishvara Padama Krishna. The supreme controller is Krishna. Ekale Ishvara Krishna Ada Sabha Britya. Yade Yache Nachoy Se Taiche Kade Nritya. I know Subhakrit Prabhu knows this verse very well because I've asked him many times over the years. So this is also a verse from the, a nice verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, chapter 5, verse 1 and 42, and it says the same thing as the Brahma Samhita. It says, Lord Krishna alone, Ekale, alone is the supreme controller, and we're all his servants or slaves. And we dance according to his will. He's running the show. We're not running the show. Hiranyakashipu is not running the show. Jaya Baldev is not running the show. And none of us are running the show. Krishna is running the show. So the only thing we have to do, so we can either be servants of Krishna or slaves of Maya. And in the final analysis, Prakrite kriyamanani gunayi karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti mayate. It says when one is bewildered by false ego, the Gita says, then one thinks they're the controller. But actually we could see at every moment we're controlled by, as soon as we walk outside, we're controlled by beautiful people, controlled by lust. We're controlled by our boss. There's so many controllers. And when we get a little position, a little control, we think I'm in control. But what happens, we could get the coronavirus, we could die, so we're controlled by time. So where's the question of being proud? That's the amazing part. There's no question of being proud in this world, yet somehow or other, we get a little money, we get a little fame, we get a little power, and we think I am the supreme controller. And so this is known as Ahankara, as the Gita says, we're the supreme controller. So we only have two choices. We could be the servants of Krishna or the slaves of Maya. In the final analysis, since Krishna is the controller of Maya, we are indirectly, controlled by Krishna. But if that's our choice, we want to be the supreme controller, then we'll see that we'll be controlled by Maya in so many ways. And so this is what is being described in this verse, and also what has been described in all universal spiritual teachings. Now, of course, we all know the story of Hiranyakashipu, who thought he was the supreme controller. And of course, there are many antagonists in our scriptures who also thought were the supreme controller, like King Vina, King Kamsa, Durvasa Muni, so many antagonists. So, of course, we all probably heard these stories. So for me, I personally like to share maybe something that's more variety that maybe others haven't heard. But we see that all the stories of these great saints are very similar. A lot of times people think, oh, wow, how do you know about all these great saints? Or how do these devotees know about so many great saints like Haridas Thakur, Prahlad Maharaj, Dhruva Maharaj? Now, who is Haridas Thakur? Huh? Excuse me? Yeah, he's Lord Brahma. He's also the incarnation of Prahlad Maharaj. It's described. I'm glad you brought that up. To go off track a little bit, there's a book called it's called the Acharya series or something. It's by I guess a Prabhupada disciple named Rupa Vilas. So he wrote a book called Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur, and it's described in that book, and he has some scriptural evidence for it that Haridas Thakur is the embodiment of three personalities. One of them is Lord Brahma, the demigod. The other one, I believe, is another personality named Brahma, and finally, the other one is Prahlad Maharaj, actually. So inconceivable, Achinta, three souls in one body to compose Haridas Thakur. And I will always joke that Hiranyakashipu is known to, now it's the Festival of Holy Name coming up, and we're supposed to do chant so many rounds, so it's described, of course, that Haridas Thakur chanted 300,000 names of the Lord. But I always argue that since he's three souls in one body, one soul chanted 100,000 rounds, then the other one took turns. So in this way, as a joke. I'm glad somebody thought it was funny. But anyways, Haridas Thakur, if you describe the life of Haridas Thakur, pretty much his qualities, what are his qualities? He was humble. He was tolerant. He was forgiving. Who was Prahlad Maharaj? He was humble. He was tolerant. He was forgiving. Who was Jesus Christ? He was humble. So in this way, we see that pretty much the lives of all the great saints are pretty much the same. So if you know the life of one saint, you pretty much know the life of the other saint. So in this way, sometimes it can become discouraging when we hear so many personalities, but we can see the essence of their life is exactly the same. So in this way, we won't have to be so discouraged. Similarly, the life of the great demons are also similar. Who was Hiranyakashipu? He was proud, he was intolerant, he was unforgiving. And so I'll share a story, similar story to the one of Hiranyakashipu pastime from the Bible in the book of Daniel. So long story short, there was a proud king. His name was Nebuchadnezzar. And it's described that he gave three Israelites. And these three Israelites' names was Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And King Nebuchadnezzar, he took care of his workers in his kingdom. He gave them a very lucrative, flourishing salary. And so usually the tendency is that when somebody in a position of power gives somebody so much facility, so much money, then they expect people to do exactly what they say. And so it's described that one day, King Nebuchadnezzar, he built a giant golden statue of himself, 90 feet tall, and he declared the law that everyone must bow down and worship this statue of himself. And so everyone was thinking, oh, if we do not worship this statue, then the majority of people thought, if we do not follow the order of the king, then what will happen to our privileges? But the three Israelites, what did they say? If we do follow the order of the king, then what will happen to our principles? So there's a saying, a people that values its privileges above its principles soon loses both. And so this is, so one day King Nebuchadnezzar, he stated he had a law that anyone who doesn't bow down to the image of myself, this giant 90-foot golden statue of myself, he will be put to death. And how did King Nebuchadnezzar put people to death? He would throw them in a furnace, a fiery furnace. So when the king, he saw that everyone was bowing down to him, except Meshach, Rashad, and Abednego, he was thinking, he told the 3 Israelites, have you lost your mind? Everyone is bowing down to me. I have given you money. I have given you facilities. And this is how you repay me? If you do not bow down to me, then I will throw you into the fiery furnace. And then you will know that I am the supreme controller. But how did Meshach, Rashad, and Abednego respond? They told King Nebuchadnezzar, they says, my dear King Nebuchadnezzar, you may be a king, but you are not the king. You may be a controller, but you are not the controller. Almighty God will be able to save us if you throw us into the fiery furnace. But even if he doesn't, we will never bow down to you. And so we could see that actually this is maybe one reason why Krishna consciousness is I was discussing this because I recently went to one program that was organized by the Russian devotees for new Russian newcomers. And I was talking to this, of course, they're not Russian devotees, they're devotees who happen to be Russian. And I was discussing this, that we see that, correct me if I was talking about this with Mother Rohini also last night. We see in Russia, they have the biggest devotee community, Russia and Ukraine, they have probably the biggest devotee community outside of India probably. And one reason is we see that there's actually a book that my friend Sergey, I don't like to say Russian friend, but he's Russian. And he told me to read this book, and it's about the Russian devotees in old Soviet Union who basically was forbidden to practice religion, including Krishna consciousness. And so there's one book, I haven't read it yet, but my friend has recommended it. It's called Salted Bread. Salted bread. And what does that mean? Basically, it's described that these Russian devotees in old Soviet Union, they would literally string bread, balls of bread, as japa beads, just so they could chant the holy name of the Lord and keep track of their name. Now, we have all these beads with so many bells and whistles, right? But what does Lord Chaitanya say? Nam nam akari bahudanija sarvashati tatrapita niyamita smarane nakala eta drisi tavakripa bhagavamamapi durdaivam idrisham iha jani nanu ragaha. Despite having so many bells and whistles on our japa beads, still I have no taste. But we see these Russian devotees, they had salted bread. So we could see that when we have so many opulences, we think we're the supreme controller, and we have no desire to worship the supreme controller. So when so many facilities are taken away from us, it's actually a great blessing, because you realize that nothing in this world, I have nothing in this world but my connection to God. Nothing in this world can give me happiness. So these devotees, these Russian devotees, they basically told these leaders, these tyrants, the same thing that Prahlad told Hiranyakashipu, that the 3 Israelites told Nebuchadnezzar. You may be a controller, but you are not the controller. You may be a king, but you are not the king. The Lord will be able to save us in this situation. But even if he doesn't, we will never bow down to you, because the 3 Israelites also told King Nebuchadnezzar, if you want us to bow down to you now, then what else will you have us to do? Harm innocent men, women, and children? So we will never bow down to you. So this is described, this is what our disposition will be. So as mentioned before, there's a nice saying. A people that values its privileges above its principles soon loses both. And so, there's many nice quotes describing that, because there's a verse in the Bhagavatam in the 7th canto, chapter 5, verse 19. The verse in Srila Prabhupada purport also describes how ego intoxicated leaders put pressure on followers to get them to do so many things. And so there's different degrees of pressure. So Prabhupada mentions in his purport, in the 7th canto, chapter 5, verse 19, he says and this is regarding the pastime of Hiranyakashipu, how Hiranyakashipu told Prahlad's teachers to teach him how to run a demoniac kingdom, actually. And so it's described that if the citizens rebel against the government, then first, give them some fame. Give them some fame to pacify them. Still, if they're not pacified, 2, give them some money, some lucrative posts, precisely what King Nebuchadnezzar did with the 3 Israelites. Still, if they're not pacified, if they don't have low character where they take money, there's a saying, men may counterfeit money. In many more cases, money makes counterfeit men. And so, Hiranyakashipu saw that Prahlad wasn't counterfeit, nor was the 3 Israelites counterfeit. So they still weren't pacified by even a lucrative post, lucrative money. So then Prabhupada says, still, if the citizens aren't pacified, then the third form of pressure is kill their reputation. Kill their reputation. And finally, if they do not care about their reputation, whether it lives or dies, because they know it's Krishna's supreme controller, then finally, the fourth form of pressure to pacify them or to get them to do what you want is kill them. Kill them. And so we see that sometimes, so these are different degrees of pressure. And so we see that these great saints like Prahlad Maharaj, or in this case, the 3 Israelites, the quality of their character was so good that they did not crumble under the greatest form of pressure. Now, we hear in the Bhagavatam that we're meant to cultivate these good qualities. Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavatiya kenchana sarva gunas tatra samasate suraha. Sarva guna means all the good qualities. Now, it's very interesting that every product that's made in this world, you could look at any product. This table, this microphone, this computer, these chairs, every product, art, the vehicles, everything, this building. So every product in this world has to undergo a test known as quality control. And what is quality control? It's described that the manufacturers of product will put a product under severe pressure. They'll break it, they'll burn it, they'll put it in water, they'll put it in so many difficult situations. Why? Because to the degree a product doesn't last under a little pressure, it won't sell. But to the degree a product lasts under lots of pressure, it will greatly sell. Now, previously, the quality control division in manufacturing companies was meant to increase the quality. Now it's meant to decrease the quality. Why? Because as long as you decrease the quality, you can sell more and more and more. So we see every product, we have to buy more and more. But this is the nature of the great souls. Because the quality, just like I'll use one other last example, especially when building, constructing a building, and there's nobody who probably knows more about this in this room except Sunil Madhava Prabhu, who owns a construction company. So you know that every building that has to be created, they take a slab of, they mix concrete together, and they'll let that concrete harden. And they'll put that concrete under something called hydraulic pressure test. And it's described that if the concrete breaks after only a little pressure, it's considered a bad mixture, and it won't be in the final building of a product of a building. But if the concrete doesn't break after a lot of pressure, it's considered good quality. So we see that Prahlad Maharaj and the 3 Israelites, the first form of pressure they experienced was they were offered some fame. No, thank you. The second form of pressure, they were offered some money. No, thank you. The third form of pressure they was off, or you could say threatened with, was their reputation would be killed. No problem. And the fourth form of pressure, the greatest form of pressure, is that their life was threatened. No problem. Why? Why was it no problem? Because they were Bajahure mana Srinanda Nandana Abaya Chadenana Bindade. So why is a computer attractive? Because it's connected to its power source. If it's disconnected from its power source, it's unattractive. So therefore in the Gita, Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvam pravartate iti mato bhajate mam buddha bhava samavitaha. He says, I am the power source of everything, and those who are wise connect to me. And what's the result of connecting to Krishna? Yasyasti bhakti bhagavati akanchana sarve gunais. You develop all the good qualities, like fearlessness. And so therefore this bhajan, famous bhajan says, Bhaja hure mana Sri Nanda Nandana Abhaya Chadenana Brindade. By worshiping Sri Nanda Nandana, the son of Nanda, then what's the result? By connecting to Krishna, the son of Nanda, then what's the result? Abhaya Chadenana Brindade. So therefore Srila Prabhupada is known as Abhaya, fearless. Now, a lot of times we may become, here's a nice point to go off on a slight tangent, but it's a very important lesson. Sometimes we may put on a show of fearlessness because if we feel like, oh, I've been in Christian consciousness so many years, I still have so many fears, then let me just hide all my fears. Now, having fears, having insecurities is not necessarily a bad thing because we all have fears, we all have insecurities, we all have our karma, we all have our threefold miseries. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because it keeps you humble. If we were totally fearless, we'd probably be arrogant, right? So to some extent, having some fears, having some insecurities, it's not a bad thing. It's only a bad thing when we ourselves have so many fears, so insecurities, but we want to expose everyone else's fears and everyone else's. So that's when it becomes a problem. So it's no problem that we have fears, we have insecurities. We're all meant to try to uplift each other. But it only becomes a problem when we try to expose everyone else's fears, everyone else's insecurities. So there's a saying, there's a difference between honesty and fault finding. So what is honesty? We see these great souls. Honesty means you look at your own fears, your own insecurities, your own mistakes. What is fault finding? You look at others people's fears, their insecurities, their mistakes. So it doesn't take much humility, just like somebody may say, I want to be honest. I'm an honest person. Let me tell you all their faults. I'm like, it takes no humility to tell everyone's faults or so-called faults, but it takes a lot of humility to say all of your faults, all of your insecurities, all of your fears. So therefore, I think this pandemic is actually a great blessing because we see that so many devotees have started so many podcasts, and then we could connect to the greater community because we see on many of these podcasts, these devotees are explaining a lot of their fears, a lot of their insecurities, and therefore it's probably more beneficial, or you could say it helps people to connect to Krishna consciousness a little bit more, knowing that so many people have so many fears, these great devotees in our movement, or young people especially, that it probably does more to get rid of your fears and your insecurities than a standardized lecture, actually. And so there's many reasons why this pandemic was a great blessing, because we could connect to the greater ISKCON community. Otherwise, every year it's just festival here, festival there, high and by, and nobody connects to the greater ISKCON community. So now we're forced to sit down and connect with each other on a deeper level. So the whole point is that we cannot judge a book by its cover. So we see, as far as fearlessness is concerned, Srila Prabhupada is known as Abhaya. But there's actually a particular lecture where Prabhupada, he's mentioning, now we see so many videos of Prabhupada and he's walking like a king, right? With his head up high and walking like, very fearless. But it's described so many times, and there's actually a lecture where Prabhupada uses the word horrified. So if you look in database and type in the word horrified, you will probably find where Srila Prabhupada uses this word. And he used his word because when his own godbrother, what was his godbrother who gave him sannyas initiation? Keshava, what was his name? Does anyone remember? Maybe Keshava, no, I think that's in the scripture. Anyway, it's something Keshava Maharaj. Not only did his own guru in his dream, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, told him to take sannyas, but his own godbrother says, abide, take sannyas. And so Prabhupada in his lecture says, when I was told to take sannyas, I was horrified. What does that mean? That means he has some level of fears, some level of insecurities. So there's no fault in having some fears and insecurities. The only fault is when we try to hide all of our fears. So this is the lesson we could take from Srila Prabhupada, that although it's not prominent in so many of his videos and lectures where he's saying, I'm horrified at every moment. No, but he still is humble enough to say, my name is Abai. He's not thinking, if I tell everyone I'm horrified, then I don't live up to my name, Abai. I'm a hypocrite, so let me just pretend to be fearless. No, he was so humble about it. So this is a lesson we could take from all these great Vaishnavas. They're so humble that they're not putting on a show to increase their prestige. And not only that, they're not only not covering up their mistakes, they're not exposing the mistakes of others in one sense. Anyway, so that's the lesson we could take. But finally, to moving on to a very important point regarding the difference between privileges and principles is that, as mentioned before, this verse says, a people that values its privileges above its principles soon loses both. So the majority of the people who followed King Nebuchadnezzar, they crumbled under a little pressure. If we do not follow this demoniac king, then what will happen to our privileges? Well, we see throughout history, if people follow a demoniac king for whatever reason, whatever pressure they put on you, then you'll suffer just like them. And so there's a verse, and there's many verses like this, but the main verse that reminds me of a couple of points is in the 6th canto, chapter 6, verse 14. It's a verse spoken by Indra, and it's a very, even though Indra is generally not considered a beacon of light or a source of wisdom, still, Krishna can inspire anyone regardless of your status in life or regardless of how many mistakes you made. Still, Krishna can inspire you because he's Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hridesha Arjuna Tishati. He's situated within the heart of everyone. So he can inspire anyone with very profound wisdom regardless of how many mistakes you made in life, like Indra. So Indra says something important. He says, quote, in the 6th canto, chapter 7, verse 14. And it's a very heavy verse, but I very much like it, and it can be expanded. It says, quote, leaders who have fallen into ignorance and who mislead people by directing them to the path of destruction are, in effect, bordering a stone boat, and so too are those who blindly follow them. A stone boat would be unable to float and would sink in the water with its passengers. Similarly, those who mislead people go to hell, and their followers go with them. And so this verse talks about blind following. Prabhupada says we should never become blind followers, even of him. And what is blind following? It means we're not reading the books. Whatever anyone tells us, we just accept. No, we should read the books ourselves. And we see that all these great leaders also, according to their individual relationship with God, make your own decisions. Think for yourself. And we see the difference between these demoniac leaders and these divine leaders is that the demoniac leaders, they wanted to do the thinking for everyone. But these divine leaders, they told people, think for yourself. Of course, you have the guidance of Guru, Sadhu, and ultimately Shastra. Read the books yourself. And so this is also in the pastime of a very nice pastime of Lord Rama. The interesting, you could use any pastime, but at the moment I'm thinking of Lord Rama. Who's a greater leader than, Sri Ram, the Supreme Lord himself? But when he was unfairly banished to the forest by Queen Kaikeyi, he never told Lakshman, he never told Sita to condemn Queen Kaikeyi. He actually told them to think for yourself. You serve her, respect her, do not have any antagonistic feelings to her. But still, they still followed Lord Rama. But the whole point is he had no ego. Of course, he's a supreme Lord, you know. But still, so this is a lesson we could take in our own life, especially if we're guiding people, that allow people to think for themselves. Lord Rama, he allowed Sita and Ram to think for yourself. You know, don't have any animosity against anyone. Because in the final analysis, who's the worst leader of them all? Prahlad Maharaj says, except for the uncontrolled and misguided mind, there is no enemy in this world. And so we see that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, now, in our time, who was a greater leader than him? But what happened to his followers? So even if you have a good leader, if you're not a good leader for yourself, then what's the use of having a good external leader if you're not a good internal leader? So there, as far as this boat analogy is concerned, it's very simple. There's another similar analogy, that if the captain of a ship is navigating a ship and he runs into an iceberg, then what happens? That all the passengers on the ship also drown. So there's so many pastimes. Even in this chapter, it's described that Kamsa, he was a demoniac leader, but all his followers, they sank into the ocean of material existence. Why? Because they followed him. Same in the, so this is actually described in the 10th canto, chapter 48, verse 17. A similar verse is described in the Untitled Chapter 3, verse 163 through 164. And this is described that Ramachandra Khan, he was so antagonistic because he was so egoistic. He was so antagonistic against Haridas Thakur. In these verses that I'm describing, it describes that because of he was a bad leader, all those who followed the whole community, they sank in the ocean of material existence. So the whole point is that why didn't these great saints sink in the ocean of material existence? Because they thought for themselves. So that's the final lesson. Think for yourself. Read the books. And so therefore Srila Prabhupada says, do not even blindly follow him. Read the books, see what they say. Don't take anyone's word for it. So this is a lesson we could take in our own life. I think I have a few more points, but maybe I will incorporate them into the Q&A. So are there any points, any discussion that anyone would like? Otherwise, I'll just mention a few more points in this regard. Yeah. Go ahead. You have the...
You said any thoughts or questions, right?
Anything.
Anything?
Criticism, so if you want to criticize.
Criticism. Yeah, I think that you're doing a wonderful job, and you inspire me. There were so many points that you made, but I wanted to try to participate before I go do the breakfast transfer. So the thing you're saying about reading the books and my thought is about churning subjects, you know, speaking and churning. So when you're in a group of people and you're discussing these topics, how do you know how can we organize something to take it to the next level or I really want to start a Bhagavad Gita class. How could we organize something to start a Bhagavad Gita class?
Well, I mean, as far as the temple is concerned, there are many, obviously, official programs to get the permission of the management, you know, to start a Gita class. Of course, that doesn't guarantee anyone will come to the Gita class, but that's no problem because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta told Srila Prabhupada, even if nobody comes to your program, still speak to the four walls. So anyone can show what they're made of when everyone's watching. The true testament of our sincerity is to show what we're made of when nobody's watching. So Srila Prabhupada, he first met his guru in 1922, I believe, when he was in his mid-20s. And when Prabhupada experienced substantial results over 45 years later, when he was 70 years old. So therefore, he'll be on book distribution. This actually kind of goes into one of the other points I wanted to make. So for practically 45 years in India, he would go on book distribution and magazine distribution and prasadam distribution without experiencing any substantial results. Everyone would ignore them, say, get a job, old man, you know, get out my face, this and that. Still, his enthusiasm never wavered. Why? Because he was Krishna Bhakta Nishkama Ata Eva Shant Bhuti Muti Siddhi Kami Sakaliya Shant. This verse says that a Krishna Bhakta like Srila Prabhupada is always peaceful, ashant, and always satisfied. Why? Because he has no desire but anything but Krishna. And it says a non-devotee is always disturbed. Why? Because he desires everything but Krishna. And so, like, and what's everything? What's everything for most people in this day and age? Fame, results. So Prabhupada wasn't experiencing any fame, any results. So why was he still enthusiastic? Because he only cared about Krishna. So to the degree we care about fame, we care about results, then we're not so enthusiastic to maintain a Gita class, a Gita program, this and that. Why? Because the tendency is that it's natural that we want results. But if that's our only, you could say, impetus to engage in Christian consciousness, then what does that mean? Our Christian consciousness will very much fluctuate. You actually can't call it devotional service. You should call it conditional service. Hey, Prabhu, would you like to engage in some conditional service? When the conditions are right, when the results are right, then I'm enthusiastic. Then I'm enthusiastic to share. And so this actually goes into the original points I was going to make actually about this particular class. As usual, I had somehow or other, I know the verse at least 4 or 5 days in advance, but still somehow or other I never have time to properly prepare like I want. And that's a good thing because we have so many nice programs going on, so it's better than not having any programs and activities during the pandemic. So, but this goes back to actually the very first quote that I spoke in this class. And what does the quote say? It says, never forget those who paved the way before you. Never stop trying to better the world for those who will inhabit it after you. So Srila Prabhupada has paved the way for us, right? So we offer our gratitude, every day by singing so many prayers of gratitude towards him. But is Srila Prabhupada the only one who paved the way for us? No. There's so many devotees who have paved the way for us, even before Srila Prabhupada, who actually introduced us to Srila Prabhupada. But the tendency as conditioned souls, it's easy to offer our gratitude to somebody who has passed away. But it's harder to offer your gratitude to your peers who may have also paved the way. Why? Because we have that competitive mentality. And we see Prabhupada's godbrothers was competing with him to some extent, right? So it's easy to offer gratitude to our guru or those great acharyas who have passed away, but to offer gratitude to our peers, that's very much hard because we have this competitive mentality. I want to be the supreme controller. I want to be the best. And these are so many pastimes like this, especially regarding Indra. So there's one pastime in the 6th canto of Bhagavatam where it's described that Indra, for whatever reason, he was receiving so much praise from all the members of the universe that when his guru, Brihaspati, walked in his presence, he saw his guru. Now, naturally, what is his guru? His guru paved the way for him to become what he had become, such a great personality where he's receiving so much praise. And it's not possible to receive that praise without his guru's mercy and so many other people's mercy also, not just his own guru. But before I forget, this reminds me of what somebody told Srila Bhaktisiddhanta one day. They were actually insinuating that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was more elevated than his own guru, Gorakishore Das Babaji. They kind of insinuate. And why did they insinuate? They says, my dear Maharaj, we see that you travel all over India and you have so many followers and you created so many temples, but we see that your own Guru Maharaj, he sits in one place and he simply chants. And so this was kind of an insinuation that he was kind of more elevated than his guru who paved the way for him to become what he has become, successful in his spiritual life. And so the lesson is sometimes, we're put in situations where we're also, people may insinuate to us that we're more elevated than those who have paved the way for us. But what was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's response? It was a very profound response, because apparently they were in a motorboat at the time. He says, although this motorboat is moving everywhere, it is powered by a battery which is silent and unseen. In much the same way, my Guru Maharaj, he is the power source of all my activities. Although he is silent and chanting alone, he empowers me to do everything I'm doing. So in this way, very, very profound answer. So the lesson is that we're all put in situations, and sometimes we even put ourselves in situations where we want to be more elevated than others. And so in this way, Indra was also put in a situation where he was put in a very elevated position. Now, there's many analogies. One of the analogy is that, what does the word reinforce mean? Can anyone tell me what the word reinforce means? Can you give Mike? What does the word reinforce mean?
Strengthen.
To strengthen, yes. That's a good one-word definition. I asked many people and they gave like a whole paragraph. But yes, reinforce means to strengthen. Just like if you put a lock on your door, that's known as security. If you put more than one lock on your door, that's known as to reinforce your security or to strengthen your security, like you said. Therefore, maximum security prisons, they have 1 billion lots. They have guards with armed guards with, bazookas. They have so many canines, German shepherds. They have so many alarms. Why? Just so the prisoners won't get out. And so we see that Indra. Now, if one person tells us, you're such an elevated devotee, it's like no big deal, right? But if a million people, all the people throughout the universe tell you how great you are, like they told Indra, what does that mean? That means you'll be maximally imprisoned by your ego. So the lesson is, the more people tell us how great we are, then potentially the more you're imprisoned by your ego. So therefore, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta says in the Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav, there's a chapter called The Revolutionary Preacher of Truth. He says something very interesting. I mentioned it before. He says, when Bhagavan is merciful to me, he will send unlimited people to speak sour words to me just to teach me tolerance. In other words, so I could become free from my ego. So it's actually a great blessing. We want to put ourselves in so many situations. Why? To be imprisoned by our egos, right? We want everyone to tell us how good we are. So the lesson is, it doesn't matter. Sometimes we think, are they giving me constructive criticism? Are they giving me destructive criticism? Who cares? It's all good, because to the degree people don't tell you how great you are, then you won't become so proud. So that's the lesson we can take. And so how, on a practical level, how can we become free from our ego? Well, there's many things. We can offer gratitude, not just to our acharyas, not just to Srila Prabhupada, but to the devotees in our own community. And there's many pastimes like that in our Chaitanya Charitamrita. They weren't just offering their gratitude to acharyas who passed or Lord Chaitanya. They were offering gratitude to the very devotees in their own community. Another way you could say become free from your ego is to do something outside your comfort zone. And that's also outside our comfort zone, offering gratitude to our peers. Something also maybe outside our comfort zone, there may be many things, but one thing since I have this opportunity, I'm thinking how, of course, my mother paved the way for me and my brother, and I'm thinking of how my brother paved the way for myself, His Grace Jai Jagannath Prabhu. So when he came to Krishna consciousness, he was 18 years old, maybe in 2003. Krishna didn't force me to get serious until a couple years later. And so so for at least a couple years, he was a serious devotee going on book distribution, doing so many devotional activities, living in a temple. So when Krishna forced me to give serious, I had nothing better else to do. So he had me learn the mridanga, and I was learning the mridanga for a year. And then after a year or so, we started to go on Harinam by ourselves because there wasn't so many devotees living in the temple at the time, especially Western devotees. It was mostly, devotees taking care of the deities, but not many people living in the temple. So he saw, and to also answer Sevananda's question, my brother, he just started reading the books and sharing that with others. And he just basically got the devotees, the young devotees in our community, and just say, hey, let's get together, let's read Prabhupada's books. So you don't have to, always have some official label say, can I start? No, just read the books and share with others. Very simple. And so as far as book distribution is concerned, so in glorification of, in an appreciation, not only glorification, but in appreciation and gratitude, my brother. When we went out on Harinam, the first university, so we would go out every other day, either Harinam, meaning sitting down, kirtan usually, because how much can we do standing? So we did kirtan. So the first, and then we would do prasadam or book distribution every other day. So Harinam one day, and book distribution for several hours. And so the first university we went to was DePaul University in 2007. We was there for a few years. He got a club started there. So then we moved on to Northwestern. He got a club started there. We moved on to UIC. He got a club started there. Finally, the final university, it was Loyola. He got a club started there. Of course, in the later years, he was traveling so much between India. He was only here 6 months a year. So we can offer our gratitude to Acharya Nishta Prabhu and Luke Prabhu, Lokaram, I believe now, who led the clubs sometimes after my brother got it started and when he was also out of town. But the whole point is that for me, at least at first, book distribution now, there's many forms of book distribution. One, you could either buy the books, sponsor the books, and give them away for free. That's one form. Or you could set a book table out and have people come to you. That's one form. Or you could do simultaneously kirtan and book distribution. That's one form. But my personal opinion, the one form of book distribution that can free you from your ego is actually distributing them individually without any music, without any book table, and without sponsoring them, and actually taking the form of a beggar and asking people to give the books and ask them for money. And then, why? Because it doesn't matter how many PhDs you have. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter what position in management you have. Nobody cares on book distribution. So this is actually a great blessing that to the degree you do something where you're not being glorified, appreciated, it's actually a great blessing. It can humble you because you won't become so bewildered when devotees in your own community just disagrees with you. Your whole life comes crashing down because they disagree with you. So the lesson is, to the degree we put ourselves in situations outside our comfort zone, then to that degree, like book distribution for some people, then to that degree we'll become more free from our ego. But to the degree we always want to put ourselves in situations where we're appreciated, where we're honored, then to that degree, then we could be maximally imprisoned by our ego. And if that's our desire, then you could experiment with that. Like I always say, experiment with both sides of the ledger. Experiment with it. It probably won't work out too well for you. You'll be probably filing so many complaints even longer than the 18,000 verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so, therefore, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, was it his disappearance yesterday, the other day? So in one bhajan, Amar Jivan, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Amar Jivan, it means my life, and he's humbly describing his life as an example of what our mentality should be when approaching the devotees of the Lord and the Lord himself. He says, I resist all pious deeds, but I'm very active and enthusiastic to perform wicked acts. And so this is the lesson we could take, Always take the opportunity to perform some deed, some pious deed, not, piety as in material deed, but spiritual piety, where you could become free from your ego. And that means put yourself in a situation where you won't be so glorified, so appreciated. And like I said, to the degree you don't, then to the degree you'll just be filing complaints left and right. And so we see, finally, I'll just end with this. In glorification of, the Russian community throughout the world. They went through so many difficult situations. Is that we went through Soviet Union, we were enslaved, we were killed just for practicing Krishna consciousness. If somebody ignores me, I can handle it. If somebody disagrees with me, I can handle it. But why can't we handle it? Because we don't voluntarily put ourselves in situations where we become free from our ego. So we're always complaining about every little thing. And so if we do, then we'll probably either leave Krishna consciousness externally or leave Krishna consciousness internally. We won't have any bhava, any taste for Krishna consciousness or the holy name. Krishna nam mahamantra eta swabhava yejapitada Krishna upajaya bhava. It's described that we can get all the juice, all the taste, all the ecstasy from the holy name. But why aren't we experiencing it? I'm not saying I'm experiencing it, but I'm very grateful for these lessons and those who have paved the way for me of trying my best to practice why, if I'm not getting the taste, then maybe I should check, am I putting myself in a situation where I want to always be appreciated? And that's probably why you're not getting any experience of any enthusiasm or any consistent enthusiasm in your Krishna consciousness. There's many things could be said, but we have a few minutes left. Is there anything briefly anyone else want to offer? Srila Prabhu. Ekale Ishwara Krishna Ada Sabha Britya. No. I can't hear it. It's hard. Come on, Prabhu, come on.
That is great. Okay. Hare Krishna. Yeah, Prabhupada said local people can preach local people.
Local people can preach to local people?
Yeah.
Does it mean crazy people?
Not crazy.
Like local, as in Spanish local? Local. What do you mean?
Brother, he read books and he started to preach people. Hare Krishna. Yeah, you mentioned about your brother that Jai Jagannath Prabhu, he went to colleges, different colleges, and started preaching because he was from this country, so he could preach. People could accept it like that. Local people, Prabhupada said, people can preach local people like that.
That may be true to some extent, but not the fullest extent, because Srila Prabhupada was a foreigner. And even Srila Prabhupada was surprised. There is that one video, the Hare Krishna movement. So in that video, they have an audio clip where Srila Prabhupada was saying, when I came to America, I pretty much thought it was impossible to spread. But Prabhupada says, he used the word, let me just try. So even Prabhupada thought, it's going to be a miracle if somehow he'll get Westerners to follow these principles. And so the main thing is how much you love people over things. There's a saying, love people, not things. Use things, not people. And there's also another saying, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So Prabhupada's disciples saw that, even though he's from India, a foreign country, I can see he cares about us. Even though our own leaders are from our own country, they do not care about us. Why? They're sending us into the slaughterhouse, into Vietnam, and they're exploiting us in so many ways. So the main principle is, what is a person's heart? It doesn't matter what country they come from. And so therefore, Lord Chaitanya says, Kiba Vipra Kibi Nyasi, Suja Kane no Yechakusha Taba Veta Segudu Hoy. Anyone can be a leader. It doesn't matter what type of leader, some type of leader, as long as you care about people. That's only a criteria. You care about somebody more than just yourself. So that's the lesson. So anyways, thank you everyone. All right, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Grantha Ram Shri Ki Jai.